This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Japan scraps curbs on overseas arms sales, opening the door to lethal weapons exports. Tokyo's biggest defense overhaul in decades, sparking concern in Beijing. Now, the US-Iran ceasefire hangs by a thread. Tehran says no delegation has departed for a second round of talks in Islamabad, warning it will not negotiate under threat and has new cards on the battlefield. A South Korean President Lee keeping up the momentum. Fresh from India, he heads to Vietnam with a heavyweight business delegation focused on energy, critical minerals and supply chains. Also, Chinese circuit board maker Victory Giant makes a blockbuster Hong Kong debut. Shares surged nearly 60% after raising more than $2 billion in the financial hub's biggest listing this year. Also ahead, Taiwan's budget clears a key hurdle after the ruling and opposition parties broke a long-running deadlock that threatens vital military operations and procurement. Plus, China condemns Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's offering to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, while South Korea urges Tokyo to face up to its wartime past. Japan has lifted its decades-old restrictions on arms exports, allowing it to sell warships, missiles and other weapons overseas, while the government wants to strengthen its defense industrial base and boost economic growth. But critics say the move violates Japan's pacifist constitution, which renounces war. CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida tells us more.
Currently, Japan's arms sales are limited to 5 specific purposes, namely rescue, transport, vigilance, surveillance, and minesweeping. With the change, these restrictions will be removed. Japan will be able to export equipment including fighter jets and destroyers. For now, this will be limited to 17 eligible countries with which it has defense equipment and technology transfer agreement. These include the US and Australia, as well as the Philippines, which, like Japan, has overlapping maritime claims with China. The government says the security environment has grown increasingly severe in recent years, making deterrence a priority. It added that allies and quasi-allies will benefit if they can produce, maintain, and share similar defense equipment.
政府として戦後80年以上にわたり築いてきた平和国家としての基本理念を堅持します。特に自衛隊法上の武器については案件ごとに一層厳格に審査し、移転を認めうると判断、公表したときには国会に通知し、移転後の管理状況のモニタリング体制を強化して適正な管理を確保してまいります。
Its National Security Council, which comprises several key cabinet members, including Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, will approve arms transfers. Some analysts say the move to relax arms exports will help to boost Japan's domestic defense sector and deepen security ties with its allies. But a poll by Japanese daily Yomiuri Shimbun last week suggested the public is divided, with 49% of respondents against the change and 40% in favor. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Now, China has criticized Japan for scrapping its ban on overseas sales of lethal weapons. Beijing calling Tokyo's actions, quote, reckless new-style militarization. Its foreign ministry adding that the international community will remain highly vigilant and resist moves associated with Japan's changed stance. Relations between Beijing and Tokyo have been strained after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan last November. Now, she suggested back then that Japan could deploy its military if it determines that a Chinese move against Taiwan poses a threat. And her comments have drawn fierce backlash from China, including stricter export regulations on goods that have civilian and military applications. Chinese exports of rare earth magnets and materials to Japan also declined sharply in March, amid reports that Beijing has been restricting them. Although Japanese defense allies have largely welcomed its change in policy, Philippine Defense Minister noting that the move will improve his country's access to high-quality military equipment and strengthen regional security. Australia also supporting Japan, saying the new policy will help deepen defense cooperation. Canberra has recently signed a deal with Tokyo for the delivery of 3 upgraded Mogami-class frigates from Japanese firm Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. 3 members of Japan's ground self-defense force were killed during a military exercise at a training range in the southwestern prefecture of Oita. A tank shell had exploded inside the vehicle before it was fired. 1 other personnel was seriously injured, but reportedly conscious when the soldier was rushed to hospital. Investigations are ongoing. A Japanese defense minister, Shinjiro Koizumi, has called the incident extremely regrettable and promised to ensure that there will be thorough safety measures put in place. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has offered her heartfelt condolences for the victims and their families. The fate of the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran hangs in the balance with less than 24 hours left on the clock. Iranian state media reports that no delegation has departed for a new round of negotiations in Pakistan. The White House, though, says that Vice President J.D. Vance is ready to fly back to Islamabad. President Donald Trump has warned that fighting could quickly resume if the ceasefire collapses. He has said it's highly unlikely that the truce will be extended. Well, Iran's top negotiator, Mohammad Bakir Khalibaf, says that Tehran will not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats. He says Iran is ready to reveal what he calls new cards on the battlefield. Tehran has accused Washington of violating the truce through its naval blockade and the seizure of a ship, warning it may respond if the pressure continues. Well, based on when the truce began, that's set to expire overnight on Tuesday in Tehran. But Mr. Trump says it will run until Wednesday evening, Washington time. As uncertainty lingers over whether the talks will actually be taking place, China has stressed the need to ensure the momentum towards a ceasefire and that negotiations do not falter. Beijing also expressed hopes for normal transit through the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible. Shipping through the key waterway remains stagnant, with tracking data showing only 3 ships making the transit in the past 12 hours. Reports meantime suggest that more than 20 Iranian shadow vessels have made their way past the U.S. blockade. President Trump says the U.S. blockade is, quote, absolutely destroying Iran, emphasizing that it will not end until there is a deal. Well, Hira Mustafa, who has been tracking developments for CNA, she joins us live now from Islamabad. Hira, firstly, how is Islamabad working to bring both back to the negotiating table? Because I imagine lots at stake here.
Absolutely. Over the past few weeks, we have seen Pakistan has intensified its diplomatic outreach to bring the warring parties to the negotiating table. Behind the scenes diplomacy is in full swing. Earlier in the day today, we saw Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar having a telephonic conversation with the Egyptian counterpart, briefing him about the ongoing mediation efforts. Similarly, later in the day, we saw Foreign Minister having one-on-one meeting with the Chinese envoy in Islamabad, briefing the Chinese officials about the Pakistan's role in de-escalating the tensions between Iran and Washington. Simultaneously, the country's military leadership is also in direct contact with the Iranians and American leaders. The country's chief of defense forces, Asim Munir, is in direct contact with the American leadership. And simultaneously, he's also in contact with the Iran's leadership, briefing them about to find a middle ground to resolve this conflict. We are also hearing reports that Pakistan is pushing both the warring parties to extend the ceasefire window so that the room for diplomacy remains open. But it's still unclear that if the second round of the peace talks will go ahead, because there is no formal announcement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Islamabad. There's a lot at stake for Islamabad because if the ceasefire expires, and Pakistan could become a party to the conflict, because Pakistan signed a mutual defense agreement last year with Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan does not want to be the part of this conflict. Reason that Pakistan also shares a 900 kilometers border with Iran, and instability on Iranian borders means that war spillover could reach to Islamabad, and Pakistan's military capability will come under stress because Pakistan is fighting a war on terrorism with Afghanistan. So significantly, for Pakistan, stakes are high in many ways.
Many thanks for that update. Hira Mustafa reporting for CNA live from Islamabad. Well, the U.S., meantime, is preparing to host a fresh round of negotiations between Israel and Lebanon, expected in Washington on Thursday. Well, Israeli and Lebanese officials met last week for the first direct talks in decades. A 10-day truce has been in place since last Friday. The Lebanese president says planned talks is aimed at ending hostilities and Israel's occupation in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has reiterated its rejection of these negotiations. Well, Israel has insisted that its campaign in Lebanon is aimed at disarming Iran-backed Hezbollah. And despite the truce, Israeli troops stay put in southern Lebanon, where attacks have been reported. Well, that's where Israel established a so-called yellow line, similar to an Israeli military measure in the Gaza Strip. The IDF says its occupation in the 10-kilometer deep zone is to dismantle Hezbollah's infrastructure. Well, time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, South Korea's Kospi hits a record high, bouncing back from Middle East-driven losses, powered by a surge in tech stocks. Plus, the head of the International Energy Agency sounds the alarm on the energy crisis again. Hello again. Good to have your company this Tuesday evening. It is now time to get you up to speed in business with Olivia Marzuki. And Olivia, today we're talking about Hong Kong's push to become an AI finance hub. Apparently that's getting a lift from today's tech listing, isn't that right?
That's right. So there's a bumper maiden trade for a Chinese tech firm, one of NVIDIA's key Asian suppliers. Shares of China's Victory Giant Technology jumped 50% on its debut. The Guangdong-based circuit board maker raised about $2.6 billion, making it Hong Kong's biggest listing this year. And there are others lined up. CNA's Geraldine Yap reports.
Victory Giant's debut follows a recent string of Chinese AI-related companies that have sought funding in Hong Kong. And it's the biggest since Zijin Gold International raised $3.7 billion in September. Victory Giant is based in Guangdong and a major player in China's chip supply chain. The company produces printed circuit boards, the electronic backbone of AI servers, and supplies them to customers like chip titan NVIDIA.
随着 AI 的爆发 ，AI 算力、数据中心、人形机器人、无人驾驶等终端需求强劲。多家国际机构预测，2030年 AI 的基础设施建设将达到3到5万亿美金，盛虹科技将迎来新的黄金发展期。
Analysts say the recent listing run shows continued investor appetite for Hong Kong IPOs despite the ongoing Middle East conflict.
IPO companies do have their own specific drivers. So that actually overall still reflecting the positive sentiment towards the AI development. Before the geopolitical tension period, a lot of the investment interest has been attracted to the US AI sector. But given the rise in the risk premium, especially with the war in Iran, I think that drives a lot of money coming back to Asia and specifically coming to the Hong Kong IPO as well.
It's a confidence booster for some 500 companies that are currently in Hong Kong's IPO pipeline, many of them in the AI and robotics space. Hong Kong wants to become a global AI development hub and is home to about 300 companies in the sector. The government is investing heavily in research and development and is building a new data center in the northern metropolis that's expected to boost the city's computing power by 36 times. But observers say that Hong Kong still needs to find its niche in the race.
You have hundreds of cities in China trying to run towards this goal and then trying to do the same thing. And of course, some may do better, some may not. So for the case of Hong Kong, the difference is that it has a free capital flow. It has basically easier human capital movement in terms of attracting the global talent. At the same time, the financial market also provide a very strong cornerstone in terms of this positive spillover effect towards other industry and also professional services.
And that, analysts say, is something other Chinese cities may not have. Geraldine Yap, CNA, Hong Kong.
The AI boom is driving markets in the region. South Korean stocks there hitting a new record high, powered by tech optimism and a possible US-Iran peace deal. Kospi closing up more than 2.7% higher, topping the previous record set in February. It has rallied more than 50% this year, making it one of the world's top-performing indices. Semiconductor giants SK Hynix and Samsung led the advance as investors continue to bet on growing AI demand. Well, SK Hynix is due to release its earnings on Thursday and Samsung at the end of the month. Both are expected to report solid first-quarter sales. South Korea's chip exports in March hit a record high of more than $40 billion, signaling sustained investor appetite for semiconductors. Meanwhile, shares of the country's top battery makers also getting a lift after they reportedly clinched multi-billion-dollar deals to supply German auto giant Mercedes-Benz. Samsung SDI surging by as much as 20%, while rival LG Energy up more than 11%. And the rally marks an exit out of a prolonged slump amid faltering demand from the U.S. and fierce Chinese competition. And in the energy space, crude prices easing in Asian session as traders maintain cautious optimism on reports that Iran may attend peace talks in Pakistan. Brent trading at $94.70, while WTI closer to $87 a barrel. The International Energy Agency chief termed it the worst energy crisis faced by the world, given it comes on top of the effects of Russia's war with Ukraine, other than stalling the traffic in the Hormuz Strait. A string of attacks on commercial ships in the vital waterway has rattled energy markets. Ships largely avoided the Strait of Hormuz overnight following a weekend escalation between the U.S. and Iran. Data shows only 3 ships passed through the key waterway today, and they were all cargo ships rather than oil tankers. That is way below the usual daily volume of around 130 vessels. Some analysts say prices could hit $110 a barrel if the strait remains disrupted for another month.
The challenge the market has is there is a lot of short-term effects, but I think this will drag on, and certainly we don't expect, as I said, a return to normal trading condition any time in the near term, even if we do see an end to the conflict, because ultimately merchant shipping is very risk averse.
Chinese automakers are eyeing a bigger market share of hybrid electric vehicles, or HEV. Brands once focused on pure electric vehicles are now pushing harder to compete in a market dominated by Japanese manufacturers. Top Chinese automaker Geely recently unveiled its latest iHEV, intelligent hybrid technology, claiming that they deliver fuel efficiency that beats Toyota Prius by about 12%. And it is not alone. GAC, Great Wall, Chang'an, and Chery have also flagged new hybrid advances this year in what looks like a broader shift across China's auto sectors. And for years, hybrid electric vehicles were largely sidelined in China as state support favored battery-powered and plug-in models. But with tax incentives for EVs and plug-in hybrids set to ease from 2026 and tougher fuel economy targets ahead, car makers are reworking their lineups. That could open the door for Chinese brands to chip away at Toyota, Honda, and Nissan's dominance, which had a combined market share of more than 70% as of last year. Several financial regulators in Asia are monitoring and addressing the cybersecurity risks posed by tech firm Anthropic's AI model Mythos. It has vast capabilities to code at a high level, giving it unprecedented ability to identify cybersecurity's vulnerabilities. Regulators in Hong Kong, Australia, and South Korea are reviewing those risks, while Singapore Central Bank warns that AI advances could speed up cyber exploits.
Tech firm Anthropic says its new AI model, Mythos, could be too dangerous to be released to the public. Designed for defensive cybersecurity tasks, the company says the unreleased model can find and exploit serious software vulnerabilities at a level approaching and even in some cases exceeding human experts. That sparked fears that the same AI capabilities that could help defenders could also help attackers find new ways into critical systems.
This particular tool seems to be more powerful than anything else we've seen before, and is able to identify vulnerabilities that others, including humans, have overlooked for decades.
Pia Hoosh is a research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute in England.
If the tool is as good as it seems, then maybe attackers could use it to layer several different layers of vulnerabilities or exploit several sectors in parallel, for example, power and water infrastructure, and then really launch an attack that is more powerful than anything we've seen before.
Cybersecurity involves a constant race between those trying to find and fix weaknesses and those trying to exploit them. Mythos signals a significant step forward in that cyber arms race. Industries already feeling vulnerable may now have more cause for alarm.
I think the financial market has been particularly vocal about the fear of what this means to the banking sector, the potential to disrupt banking and processes and financial services. There's also a concern that this could be used by attackers to exploit vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure, which already relies on pretty outdated infrastructure in many cases already.
To limit access, Anthropic placed Mythos in a restricted initiative called Project Glasswing. Project Glasswing brings together companies including Amazon Web Services, Apple, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Google, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Palo Alto Networks, as well as more than 40 additional organizations that build or maintain critical software infrastructure. Anthropic says that the purpose of Project Glasswing is to use Mythos to help secure critical software before others weaponize similar capabilities.
The fact that this is one company that has the power to decide now which of its selected partners has access to this really illustrates how powerful these tech companies are, and that at the moment it's really unclear who has access to this, and are there any European companies, for example, that have access to the tool? So I think there's many questions that are left unanswered at the moment that add to this hype and this perception of it being an absolute game changer.
The bigger issue may be less whether Mythos alone changes cybersecurity than whether it signals a broader shift. Anthropic says it sees no reason to think Mythos represents a plateau, and says frontier capabilities are likely to advance substantially over the next few months. CEO Dario Amodei in February suggested we may be on the cusp of a new era, where computer thinking surpasses the human intellect.
We're increasingly close to what I've called a country of geniuses in a data center, a set of AI agents that are more capable than most humans at most things and can coordinate at superhuman speed.
Yeah, funny how AI can potentially surpass our human intellect, but hopefully not today. That's all I have for you, Oteli.
Thanks so much for those business reports, Olivia. On that note, we are going to zip out for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Taiwan's budget clears a key step after a 6-month impasse threatens to derail the island's military budget and procurement plans. Insights from our correspondent. Plus, South Korea refutes claims that one of its ministers had revealed classified U.S. intelligence. You're watching East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. The US-Iran ceasefire hanging by a thread. With less than 24 hours left on the clock, Tehran says no delegation has departed for a second round of talks in Islamabad and warns it will not negotiate under threat. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung set to begin a 4-day state visit to Vietnam after visiting India to promote cooperation and investment. Plus, Japan lifts a decades-old restriction on arms exports, allowing it to sell warships and other weaponry overseas. China slams Japan for its decision, calling the move a reckless new-style militarization. The Japanese government looking to strengthen the country's defense industrial base and boost economic growth. Critics, though, say the move violates Japan's pacifist constitution, which renounces war. But an expert CNA spoke with explains how supporters of the policy are likely to defend it.
People might make the point that, it's more than 8 decades since the end of the Second World War. Japan is a completely different country from that of the 1930s, 1940s. So in a sense, why not? If other countries are free to export arms, then Japan should be free to do so as well. That's one point. The other is, I think the government would say that this still is consistent with Japan's commitment to peace, given the fact that there will still be quite a few restrictions on the arms exports. It will only be to countries with which Japan has signed the export, equipment and technology transfer agreements, and also that Japan, in principle, will not export weapons to countries that are currently at war.
Well, there's also a view that the move is aimed less at conflict and more towards deterrence, as Tokyo deepens security ties with partners in the region.
This is not for the war fighting, but it is more for the deterrence and to strengthen the capabilities of the friends and allies such as Philippines or Australia. And I think these are important for improving our capabilities to deter any external threats. And I think this is at least associated with the idea of maintaining the peace in the world. I think the pacifist clauses of Constitution was pretty relevant in the time of Cold War, but I think this has changed because of the end of Cold War and the changing environment, the circumstances.
So I think that in all likelihood, we're going to see an emphasis on the Asian region. Now, in a sense, we are already seeing that. There was the really landmark agreement with Australia on the export of Japan's Mogami class ships. And I think that there'll be a continuation of an emphasis on this region. And I think that in particular, the Japanese government would be keen to see some arms exports to countries in Southeast Asia. So the Philippines, Indonesia, they might be some of the markets that Japan will be looking at. It is economically important, but also it's about strengthening security ties with those countries.
Oh, Japan's regional focus could also reflect a broader strategic concern, and that is China's growing military strength and its impact on the balance of power across Asia.
If you think of the arms race, look at the size of the Chinese armed forces, the size of the Chinese defense spending. I think the ratio of the increase of the Chinese defense spending is exceeding anybody around in East Asia. So probably what we are doing is just building the capabilities to at least to maintain some composure of the national security status of the friends and allies like Philippines and Indonesia, Australia, and to make sure that we are catching up with the huge increase of the Chinese military spending.
Well, Japan has kept to a strict pacifist stance for decades after World War II. Article 9 of the Constitution renounces war and the use of force for international disputes. It also prohibits the maintenance of armed forces and limits its export of lethal weapons. But in the past decade, that policy has been steadily changing. Well, in 2014, under then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Japan eased its long-standing ban, allowing some form of exports, but they were limited to transfers aimed at humanitarian assistance, as well as international cooperation seen to enhance Japan's security. Well, 2 years later, in 2016, Japan leased 5 used TC-90 trainer aircraft to the Philippines, and that's for maritime patrols over the South China Sea. But in that same year, Tokyo saw a setback in its export ambitions, failing to clinch a $40 billion deal to supply advanced diesel submarines to Australia. In 2020, the Philippines acquired air surveillance radars, with Mitsubishi Electric becoming the first Japanese companies to sell defense equipment overseas. And 2 years later, Japan joined the UK and Italy to build an advanced stealth fighter for mid-20s delivery in the Global Combat Air Program. In 2023, Japan established the Overseas Security Assistance to provide military aid to like-minded states in Southeast Asia and the Pacific for equipment like patrol boats, drones, and radar systems. And also in that same year, Japan loosened export rules to allow equipment to be built under license and sold back to the country of origin. So just over the weekend, Japan formalized a $7 billion agreement with Australia in what is Tokyo's largest ever arms export to provide Canberra with a dozen stealth frigates armed with a potent array of weapons. And it's all part of Australia's plan to refresh its fleet of aging Navy vessels while strengthening its deterrence posture towards China. Now, Taiwan's general budget is a step closer to passage after rival parties agreed to begin reviewing the 2026 national budget, ending an impasse that has lasted more than 6 months. Premier Chua Rong-tai thanked all party caucuses, saying the legislature would continue to support Taiwan's development in line with President William Lai's policy direction. The delay comes after months of political wrangling between the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and opposition lawmakers who had blocked the review over disputes tied to military pay raises and pension reforms. Well, under the agreement, the cabinet must also move ahead with part of a previously approved budget worth more than $2.3 billion to fund new initiatives even before the full budget clears the legislature. Well, we've got CNA's senior correspondent Victoria Jen joining us live now from Taipei to unpack this all for us. So, Vic, the general budget is moving once again. Tell us, how is that different from the defense budget, and what are some of the sticking points that have to be overcome?
Well, that's an important distinction. What's moving now is the general budget, basically the money that needed to keep the government running. After more than 230 days of deadlock, lawmakers are finally starting to review it. A big reason for that is politics. With local elections coming up, the opposition doesn't want to be seen as blocking everything, so there's pressure to move things forward. But that doesn't mean the same progress will apply to the $40 billion defense budget. That plan, backed by President William Lai, is much more controversial. The ruling DPP wants to push the full package through, saying it's urgent. But the opposition, the KMT and Taiwan People's Party, have different ideas. The TPP wants a smaller plan, and the KMT is asking for more oversight and questioning the size. And even inside the KMT, there's no single view. Some are cautious about the cost, while others worry about the risk of delaying it. So while the general budget is moving, the harder fight is still ahead, and that is the defense budget.
Right, and Victoria, what impact does the delay actually have, especially on arms deals and also on the bigger picture?
Well, the delay is already having an impact. The defense budget is closely tied to U.S. arms deals, and those follow strict timelines. If Taiwan takes too long, it could lose its place in line, meaning deliveries could be pushed back by years. Lawmakers have tried to keep things moving by approving some agreements, but without full funding, there is still uncertainty. But there are signs that things could shift. KMT Chairwoman Zheng Li-wen is planning a trip to the U.S. in June. Analysts say that could soften the party's position, as the KMT also wants to show that it can manage ties with Washington. All of this comes at a sensitive time after recent engagement with Xi Jinping and ahead of a possible meeting between Xi and Donald Trump. So from the U.S. point of view, this isn't about weapons. It's about whether Taiwan can follow through on defense commitments. That's why this next stage matters. Even though the process has restarted, it's still unclear if lawmakers can reach a deal. Otelli?
Hey, many thanks for that update. CNA senior correspondent Victoria Jen in Taipei. Hong Kong's government is looking to launch its first ever 5-year blueprint this year to better align the city with China's national development. Chief Executive John Lee said that public consultations on a whole range of issues will be held this quarter as the government moves to form what it calls a collaborative mechanism with the Legislative Council. The plan will cover broad aspects ranging from investment and industries to infrastructure. And for the city's residents, a focus on issues such as healthcare and welfare. The leader also stressed that the plan will help Hong Kong better integrate and serve the overall development of the country, while allowing the city to reap the advantage of opportunities from China and beyond. The document will also serve as the guide for the city's future policy address and budget. A South Korean President, Myung, will begin a 4-day state visit in Vietnam this evening, while he's seeking to strengthen ties with his recently elected counterpart, To Lam. Both leaders will be holding a summit in Hanoi on Wednesday, where disruptions caused by the Iran war is likely to take center stage. A senior South Korean official said that the talks will focus on critical minerals and energy, as well as developing resilient supply chains. Myung is joined by a large business delegation, and multiple corporate deals are expected to be signed. The South Korean leader was earlier in India for a state visit, where he signaled the full-scale launch of his administration's Global South diplomacy. Mr. Yi and his Indian counterpart, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, upgraded a trade pact and deepened ties across a range of areas. Separately, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has rejected claims that a minister revealed classified U.S. intelligence on Pyongyang's nuclear facilities. Well, Mr. Lee posted late yesterday that knowledge of a third uranium enrichment facility in North Korea's northwestern region of Kusong already exists in research reports and even in the news. And the South Korean leader defended his minister's remarks, saying the accusation was wrong and called the situation absurd. Local media reports say Washington has reduced information sharing on North Korea with Seoul following the incident. South Korea's defense ministry has declined to comment on the changes. It said separately that the two nations were working closely on North Korean missile launches. The Unification Ministry earlier said that it had sufficiently explained Chung's remarks to the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, adding that the U.S. side had accepted the explanation. South Korea's Unification Minister Chung Do-young, at a parliamentary session last month, spoke publicly for the first time on the Kusong nuclear facility. The U.S. government is starting to process refunds for tariffs that were deemed illegal by the Supreme Court. And an estimated $165 billion is owed to some 330,000 American importers, with the bulk of the claims stemming from duties on Chinese goods. Now, the portal for submitting claims has opened, but only the entities that officially paid the tariffs will be able to recover money, like FedEx or Costco. This means millions of Americans who paid higher prices for products will not be able to claim the refunds. Even though the refund filing system is up and running, companies still face uncertainty. For one, how soon they can get their money back, given the huge volume of requests expected. And the fact that the White House hasn't said whether or not it will try to go back to court to fight giving the refunds. Coming up next on the bulletin, Singapore Maritime Week opens under the shadow of the Middle East crisis, with the industry grappling with disrupted trade routes and higher shipping costs. Plus, a shrine offering in Japan that threatens to reopen old wounds. Global industry leaders are gathering at Singapore Maritime Week to address key challenges the sector faces. Now, at the heart of discussions is the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, where shipping has largely stalled amid the war on Iran. And the situation is driving up shipping costs, disrupting trade routes, and raising concerns over energy security. Industry players are now looking at how to restore safe passage. Well, CNA spoke with a number of event attendees, including the International Maritime Organization's Secretary General, on what it will take to ensure safe navigation.
The first ones that have to step up for action are actually the countries that had started the conflict, because maritime trade was operating without any incidents before that. The moment that actually this conflict will de-escalate, our rules are very clear. The navigation in the Strait of Hormuz has been regulated by IMO since 1968, and we do it in a very secure manner. The only thing that we need is the guarantees that there will be no attacks on ships, on innocent seafarers, and immediately will reapply the international law that it is relevant for straits for international navigation.
That call for action comes as risks in the waterway remain high. The International Chamber of Shipping says safety remains top priority.
Ships, at the moment, we do not feel that it is secure for them to go through because we have not received absolute confirmation that it is absolute safe to do so. We welcome the ceasefire agreement that was reached. We encourage the parties to proceed to finalize and we have been working with the International Maritime Organization and the states involved, as well as from the seafarer side, because we should not forget that right there in the Persian Gulf we have in excess of 1,500 ships and close to 20,000 seafarers stranded for a long time. And for us the priority is and will remain number one is the safety and well-being of our seafarers, and of course then the safe passage through. So unless we receive absolute certainty that it is safe to do so, although we welcome it and this is what we're asking for, right now we have not received such information that will allow safe navigation, which of course extends more than just the issue of possible mines, but any other threats that will be in the region.
Well, industry players, meanwhile, are exploring options on how to best adjust to disruptions caused by the conflict.
I think there's a short-term or mid-long-term, and we have to think separately. For short-term, because of disruptions, freight rate, I think there's a high possibility that it's rather up and down, because all the constraints can function as the restraint. For mid-long-term, once this crisis is prolonged, then it will impact the manufacturing industries and it quite possibly impacts to the less cargo. Then it can, as a pressure to downwards, eventually the industries, customer industries will have to refill the stock and storage. Then that can go up. So I think for coming years, it's quite possible that the freight market can be volatile, or can be more volatile than the usual times.
What we've seen from our customers over the last couple of weeks is not so much panic, but much more precision. And they have adapted in three ways. The first one is really rerouting. So we're using alternative ports, alternative airports, coupling them with land bridges to move cargo into the Middle Eastern countries, but also cargo that does not actually touch the Middle East, but usually would fly via hubs in the Middle East. We're now offering solutions to them to directly fly this from Southeast Asia into Europe, for example. The second way in how they are adapting is really not so much the panic stockpiling that we've seen during the COVID period, but really more selective, really only for high value goods, critical spare parts. So really being a little bit more conscientious and more focused in terms of what goods they need moving. And thirdly, customers are much more open and flexible when it comes to using multimodal solutions. So sea-air solutions, rail-sea solutions, air-truck solutions. So really combining the different modes of transport to actually get their goods to the destination that they need to.
6 people were reported injured in a powerful earthquake that struck northern Japan yesterday. 2 of them are in serious condition. And tsunami warnings have since been lifted, but authorities have issued a special advisory warning that an even more powerful mega quake may be looming. And that's a potential tremor with a magnitude of 8.0 or even higher. Officials say the probability of its occurrence is now at 1%, up from 0.1%. Wide stretches of the northeast are now under the special advisory, as shown in red, stretching from Hokkaido to Chiba. The capital, Tokyo, is not included. Some 182,000 people are affected. Now, the 7.7 magnitude quake off Iwate Prefecture yesterday triggered tsunami waves. One tsunami measured 80 centimeters, while the rest were half that or less. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has urged the public to be prepared for the next few days.
また1週間程度、後発地震、注意情報の発表に伴う特別な備えとして、すぐに避難できる体制の維持、非常持ち出し品の常時携帯などしてください。
China and South Korea have criticized Japan after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi reportedly sent a ritual offering to a controversial war shrine in Tokyo. Local media say Ms. Takaichi donated a masakaki to the Yasukuni shrine for a traditional spring festival, but will be foregoing a visit. China and the Koreas consider the temple a symbol of Japan's wartime militarism. It honors about 2.5 million Japanese war dead, including convicted war criminals.
中方坚决反对，严厉谴责日方有关靖国神社的消极动向，已向日方提出严正交涉、强烈抗议。
Seoul expressing deep disappointment and regret over repeated offerings and visits by Japanese leaders to the shrine. A Japanese prime minister has not visited Yasukuni Shrine since 2013. Ms. Takaichi, who is a hardline conservative, used to be a regular visitor to the shrine, but has not done so since taking office.
高市総理は、私人の立場でmasakakiを奉納されたものと理解をしており、政府としてこの場で見解を申し述べるべき事柄ではないというふうに、認識をしているところでございます。
Well, still ahead on Asia tonight, here are some of the stories that we're also going to be covering. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's leadership on the line over his appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US. Mr. Starmer has said he was wrong to make the appointment, but blamed officials for not telling him that a security vetting body had advised against the appointment. Taiwanese President William Lai has cancelled his trip to Eswatini, a landlocked country in southern Africa. Taipei says that a number of nations in the region withdrew permissions for his aircraft to fly over their territories. Taiwan's presidential office blaming Chinese pressure as the reason. These stories and more on Asia tonight at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time, right here on CNA. I hope you've enjoyed this Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. That's all the time we have for you, but you can always check out our headlines anytime at cna.asia and look us up on all the socials, including Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.